Welcome to the Hiking Thru Podcast, where we get to pull up a seat at the campfire and have a conversation about all things through hiking. I'm Erin Egan, and today's guest is Sea Lion, known off-trail as Nhandi Singleton. She had a serious case of imposter syndrome when she hit the PCT in 2018. Coming from a background with limited hiking, it took hundreds of miles for her to feel like she belonged. In this episode, we unpack that and talk about being a minority on trail, body image, and how the trail can mess with your head, becoming a risk-esque taker, and that one rainy day. You can also find this episode on our website at hiking-thru.com or on Apple Podcast and all the other podcast places. Enjoy my conversation with Sea Lion. Let's get this party started.
Awesome.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I love your journey on the Pacific Crest Trail. I love your evolution on the trail, so to speak.
Thank you.
Did it feel like an evolution to you as you were doing it, or?
Absolutely. An absolute evolution. I've said it multiple times, but starting the trail, I did not know that I would, or didn't believe that I would actually finish. I definitely had a serious case of imposter syndrome where I just felt like I did not belong on the trail because I had no backpacking experience really prior to. On top of being the only Black woman I'd come in contact with. So I just felt like, am I in the right place? But, you know, as we got through the trail, I, of course, made great friends who have become pretty much family at this point. And I came to realize that it was important not only to me because I sacrificed so much to be there, but I wanted to prove to myself that as a Black woman, as someone who didn't have a ton of backpacking experience, that I could do it. I was worthy of completing the trail, and that, you know, it was well worth the sacrifices I'd made to get there, and that any change and evolution, as you say, that we experience through life is not supposed to be easy. Oftentimes it's very difficult and you're constantly second guessing yourself. So it changed me for the better, as I feel like it does most people.
You used a really interesting word in there that I want to delve into a little bit more. And you said worthy of being there. And that is such an interesting word choice. Mm-hmm. Why were you questioning, I guess, your worthiness to be there, to be on the trail?
Because where I come from the inner city of Baltimore, Maryland. And throughout my lifetime, especially young adulthood and adolescence, I was always taught to strive and achieve to be, you know, financially stable and go to college and, you know, do all of these super predictable things that that are supposed to make you feel whole. Mm-hmm. And with that, I felt like I was in a way betraying myself by stepping out of that and doing something completely, you know, completely off the rails as far as my mother was concerned and everyone around me was concerned. So I didn't really feel like I had the right to be doing that because I was supposed to be in my cushy corporate job, like climbing the ranks and making money and elevating in that way. But I was not meant to be out on, out on a trail, not working and enjoying nature and enjoying myself and getting to know me better. I didn't think that I was supposed to be doing that.
Interesting. Yeah. That path, the expectation path specifically, is so pervasive. I mean, and not only just about whether you can do the trail or should do the trail or not, but just across the board.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. And growing up in a single parent household, that was constantly being instilled in me that I had to be good at what I did and I had to be the best at what I did. And so when I flipped it on my mom being like, well, you told me I had to be the best at what I do. So right now what I'm going to go do is this. And she's like,
that's not what I meant.
How dare you? How dare you twist my words? But yeah, it was also a pivotal moment for me in my adulthood to be like, to stand firm in what I decided to do with my life. Because up until that point, a lot of what I did was I made decisions that I made because I knew that I was expected to make those decisions, not necessarily because I wanted to. So this was like the first time in my adulthood that I was like, yeah, I'm gonna just go do something completely different. And it was tough, but eventually I made it there. So it was great.
When you say you made it there, meaning you made it to the trail or you made it to Canada?
Made it to the trail. Made it. I did. Both. Yes, but I meant like making it to the actual trail, which in itself was a journey.
Yeah. Your boyfriend, now fiance, also hiked with you, or you guys were a couple hiking the trail that year, 2018. Yes. But he had previously hiked the AT. Yes. Was that part of what, or actually maybe let me just step back and say, like, so how were you introduced to the trail or the concept even of the trail?
Yeah. So my partner, Space Jam, he hiked the AT in 2017. And we actually hadn't spoken in like 3 or 4 years. And somehow through Snapchat or something got reconnected. And we were just texting back and forth. And he was like, yeah, I'm getting ready to hike the Appalachian Trail. And I was like, okay, like how long is that going to take? He said, yeah, I'm taking a leave of absence from my job. It'll be like 5 or 6 months. And I had never heard of that concept. I've done day hikes. I've done overnight, car camping trips, but I'd never heard of anyone hiking an entire trail from point A to point Z. And so he hiked it that summer and we stayed in touch, and he runs a blog, so he kept that pretty up to date. And I was just so in awe of, one, all the experiences he had, but also the fact that he could walk 2,100 miles in 5 months. So when he got back, he said that he was going to hike the PCT. And I said, well, if there was one of the the major 3 trails I was going to hike, it would be that one. So sign me up. And so then from there we started planning and yeah. So I found out about thru hiking from him.
Essentially through him and through his blog, because I'm sure as he's blogging about it, you're getting your first education
exactly.
in hiker trash.
Exactly. Yeah. And he just finished his Triple Crown December of 2019.
Right. Yeah, I saw that. When you say, you're following his journey and so when he says PCT, you're like, if that's the one, that's the one.
Yeah.
But I have to suspect that like that conversation in your head wasn't quite that simple.
Oh yeah, absolutely not. I arrived to that place. Every single point of decision making up until getting to the PCT was a journey within itself. So I, of course, I was enamored by the concept of it. I hadn't done a ton of research because whenever we do sort of adventure trips, we don't like to look at pictures too much because we don't want to feel like once we get there, the view or the experience has been spoiled. Mm-hmm. So I didn't do a ton of research in that way, but I started looking at blogs and seeing other people's journeys and stuff like that. And I love the West Coast as well. So, so I was like, well, I've always wanted to live on the West Coast. So I was like, well, I could live there for 5 months if I walk the whole coast. So yeah, of course I had to think about work and my apartment and finances and just even how not working for 5 to 6 months would potentially change the trajectory of my career, which is, as I told you, something that has been nailed into my skull. Yeah. It was a difficult decision. But ultimately, I realized that, as I've said before, I felt like at that point in my life, I needed to do something that would kind of jolt me out of autopilot. And this just happened to be that thing.
You were definitely speaking hiker language.
Yeah.
I know you've kind of alluded to your mom's resistance to it. But I would love to hear more about like what because she had to evolve as well in that journey with you. And I'm assuming probably some of your friends and whatever, the same thing. Like they had to get over the initial, no, you can't do that. That's not what you do, to, oh, of course, this is what she's going to do. And we're going to follow along with her.
Yeah. It took my mom a while to get there. After I told her, immediately when I told her, she just was like, no, absolutely not. You are not doing that. You're crazy. You've worked so hard. You have so much there's so many other things you can do. Like, why that? And then as we continued to have conversations, and I was just like, I'm doing it though. And she'd be like, but what about bears and wildlife? And I'm like, well, I'm doing it still. And eventually she came to understand that I was staying firm in it, and that as much as she doesn't want me to be, I am an adult who can make my own decisions. And she also realized that I am a generally level-headed person, and I don't make rash decisions without thinking about the whole. And so she eventually was like, I have faith in you. I have had faith in you your entire life. If I need to, if I have to support this, I'm going to do it. And so after I'd say about a month or so, she was really, really into it. She's like, well, she started doing research, and by the time we were heading out to the trail, she was packing all sorts of snacks up for Space Jam and I, and she agreed. It was also about having her involved in the process.
Yeah.
So she was very excited to go on trips to Sam's Club, and she was very excited about going to the post office to send me, packages and things like that. So the more involved I got her, the more at ease she felt.
Was she like as you started doing the trail and as you were progressing up it, did she celebrate like those moments, those, oh, we finished the desert. Oh, we're, halfway through the Sierras. Maybe not. Really?
She was just like, oh, yay, you guys are almost home. You're getting closer to being back. And she also didn't do a ton of research my mom is very much so an indoorsy, loves her comfort zone type of a person. So she loved when we would send her pictures, but she was just like, I don't need to know the gory details of this thing. I just need for you guys to be back. So don't get injured, don't get kidnapped, get home. So yeah, that was basically that.
What was her biggest fear for you doing the trail?
I think there were a couple of them. I think the main one for her was that I would somehow lose sight of life and just never come home. I think that she thought I was maybe spiraling, maybe having a quarter life crisis or something.
Yeah.
And I think that she also just wanted me to be safe. I have always, up until that point, I'd always lived super close to home, where if something had happened, I was at most 20 minutes away, a 20-minute drive away. And, if something happened with her, something happened with me, we could easily pick up and be there within 20 minutes. But being on the West Coast, being in the middle of, not having cell service, that was very difficult for her because I'm the youngest of her children as well. So it's like the babies. She's done with me. She's leaving me. And it's like, no, Mom, I'm not leaving you. I'm not abandoning you. This isn't the end of us. I'm just going to go have an experience and I'll be back. And so I tried my best to alleviate that anxiety with text messages and phone calls, which her and my grandmother very much so looked forward to getting phone calls from us whenever we were in town.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. What was your biggest fear before hitting the trail?
My biggest fear was that I wouldn't make it, that I had given up my luxuries and my comfort and my predictability, and I would go and attempt a thing and not reach the goal. And that kind of stuck with me for, I'd probably say at least half of the trail, where I realized that it was always a physical thing, but it had become less of a physical thing. It became more of a mental thing. And I was worried that I wouldn't be able to mentally sustain myself throughout that 5 months.
What do you mean by that? Mentally sustain?
Like keeping my head in the game, keeping myself in it, being like, yes, my body hurts. Yes, this is the longest walk of all time. But I have a goal in mind and I'm going to stick with it. There were multiple times throughout the trail that I was like, I don't know that I'm going to be able to make it. But every single day I had to talk myself into, you can do this. You're going to make it. Like, you're strong enough. It's just in your mind at this point.
Those moments that you're talking about where you didn't think you were going to make it,
Mm-hmm.
was that about pain and discomfort, or the challenge of climbing one more peak or mountain or whatever, or something else?
A big part of it was a sense, as I alluded to before, like my sense of belonging. I didn't feel like I had a community, really, especially because the day before we started, we stayed at Scout and Frodo's, and I remember walking in and being like, okay, like, this is cool. Everyone's really chill and just hanging out. And then we all started to talk and mingle, and everyone seemed to know so much about hiking and backpacking. And people were having conversations about gear and other hiking, other backpacking trips that they had done. And I'm just like, I can't contribute anything to this conversation. So I'm just kind of like a wallflower. And I think that because we were on the trail, a lot of conversations defaulted to other hiking trips and other backpacking trips. So I didn't really have, for at least 400 to 600 miles plus, didn't have people that I, outside of my boyfriend, I didn't have anyone I really felt like I connected with on a person-to-person level, because everyone else seemed to be so greatly connected to backpacking. I was just getting my footing in and didn't really have much to contribute to those conversations. So that was pretty tough. And then in addition, I was often the only person of color in my groups. So I couldn't really relate to someone, we get into town and having to spend extra time moisturizing and conditioning my hair and braiding it and all that stuff. Like, people were just like, what is going on? What are you doing? And it's like, I'm sorry, guys, I can't go to this thing because I need to spend 2 hours conditioning and rebraiding my hair. So all of those things, outside, in addition to also being so greatly out of my comfort zone, I was constantly second guessing myself.
It made you feel separate from?
Yeah.
Out there.
Yep.
I listened to your podcast with Twerk, and
love him.
Likewise.
Adore
him. And you made a reference about Black person radar. Just, in terms of feeling part, or feeling a connection with somebody while out there.
Yeah. It's funny that you bring that up, because I was thinking about that yesterday, and what was it? It couldn't have been last year, because no one did anything last year.
True.
Summer of 2019, Space Jam and I went to the trail days on the AT, and there was this amazing fire circle, and Kevin and I had Space Jam. I keep calling him Kevin because his name is Kevin. I don't call him Space Jam on the day-to-day, but Space Jam and I had talked about Black person radar, and obviously he's white. So he's like, I don't get what that is.
Mm-hmm.
So we walk up to this fire circle and everyone's just chanting and walking around the fire. And then this Black guy walks around and he just nods at me and he's like, yeah. And Kevin was like, is that it? Was that it? And I was like, that is it. He's just like, we acknowledge each other. We didn't have to say anything. It's just like, I see you, I got you. And that is very, very comforting and super powerful for us. It's like, it's really nice. It's really nice.
The feeling of being seen.
Mm-hmm.
And was that because of feeling out of your depth and because of not having the hiker stories to contribute and stuff like that? Did that? Because I'm assuming that as you were hiking, even if you didn't necessarily see people on the trail, like when you were going into towns, you would see people of color, and the acknowledgement there, I see you, I see the hard thing that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
We appreciate what that is.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite in-trail pastimes. It was like, all I need is to just see one person of color and my cup will be full. My heart will be full. I did make a nice connection with a woman at the post office in Big Bear, and she was just my biggest supporter. And I had a package from my mom that hadn't arrived yet, and she bounced it ahead to Wrightwood for me. And I texted her every once in a while on the trail, and she's just like, you're awesome. So proud of you. Like, keep going. So it was even those sorts of things that was like keeping me going.
It's interesting because so much of the conversation around the trail and so much of people's memories of the trail are about the community, are about the people. Mm-hmm. And it would make it 10 times harder if you don't feel the community.
Yeah. It was tough for the first month or so. It was really tough. And I had made a friend, and her trail name is Songbird. And
Caro?
Yeah, Caro. Yeah.
I love Caro.
Oh yeah. She was my first trail friend. And her and I talked a lot about finding our thing on the trail, because Kevin's thing on the trail was photography. So he had something that he could pour himself into outside of just hiking every day. And I didn't really have a thing. So I was like, well, while I'm trying to find my community, maybe I should come up with a thing. And then I tried to come up with a thing of interviewing people and talking to them. And I was like, well, my heart's not really in it. And so I tried journaling, and that lasted for like 3 days. It's like, my heart's not really in it. And I just decided that I just needed to be in the moment and just experience, something I'd never experienced before. But then eventually we found our trail family, made up of two Canadians and a bunch of other a hodgepodge of other folks. And we, as I said before, they've become my family outside of the trail. And even with them, it took me a while to re-find, because I felt so out of place in a lot of settings. I wasn't really being myself. And I'm a social introvert. So I like in social settings, I like to be interactive, and I like to learn about people, and I like to feel a part of the group. But there are a lot of times especially toward the beginning, where felt myself retreating and I wasn't engaging with people. And even Space Jam was like, are you okay? Because this isn't really like you. And I'm like, I don't know. I just don't feel right. I don't feel a part of this. But once we got our trail family, we started to get our footing, and they were just genuinely nice people. I started to open up more to them. And then eventually with other people, I was able to be more of myself. But that was a difficult thing to do. And I don't completely understand why it took me so long. But I think I just had to talk myself out of thinking, because it had a couple of interactions where people had asked me questions about being Black and asked me about how I felt about being there, to where at points I felt like I'm walking into this situation and everyone's looking at me and being like, wow, what are you doing here? And I'm waiting for people to ask, like, to go ahead and just ask the questions so we can get past it. But I often felt like I was just on the outside looking in, like I wasn't really actually a part of the community, which then became one of the reasons why I wanted to finish, was to be like, no, I'm not the first Black woman to ever hike the trail. And we need more. Like, I would love to see more Black women doing it. So I owe it to myself and owe it to them to be able to go back to my cousins and you know, my nephew and say, this space is for us as well. Like, you can go and do that if you choose to, and that the space is accepting and a safe space for us to enjoy as well.
As uncomfortable as you were feeling out there, did it feel safe?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. I had like one infamous encounter, but other than that, you know, no one ever made me feel like I didn't belong. No one ever made me feel like I couldn't be there, that I shouldn't be there. That was really mostly me in my own head, creating a barrier for myself. And that's not to say that people might not have been thinking it, but no one actually said it to me.
Yeah. How, besides for like spreading the word, besides for having the conversations and trying to show people that the trail is for everyone, like, do you have any thoughts on other ways to make the idea of doing a trail, particularly the longer trails, more welcoming or more even a thought?
Yeah, you know, I've thought about this because I've been asked this, like a variation of this question before, and it's difficult. It's a difficult question to answer, because I think a big part of it will have to be societal changes and economic. I think it's much bigger than the outdoor industry and the outdoor community making people feel comfortable to go and do it. I think, you know, where I come from, there weren't even any trails within 30-minute drive, you know, and where in my neighborhood, there weren't a ton of parents who even had vehicles. So they're not thinking about taking their kid to hike a trail. And I know tons of people who have worked themselves into a place where they love their comforts and they love their warm bed. So the idea of sleeping on a sleeping pad for 5 months sounds terrible. And then and then there are people who just can't afford it. So I think, yes, the outdoor community should be being more inclusive, and obviously spreading the stories of people of color who are doing these trails and who are out there doing the work. But I think it's a bigger changes need to happen so that people feel that they can have the luxury of being able to do a long trail. And I think, unfortunately, because of the disparity in the systemic racism that we all know is a part of this country, it's difficult to make that shift until other things change as well.
Yeah. And I can believe, or would believe, that a piece of that as well is, I mean, even just knowing about the trails, but to make the step, to take the step, you have to conceive of yourself doing the thing. I mean, and that applies to so much more than just hiking the trails. I mean, it applies to jobs, it applies to careers, it applies to relationships, it applies to so much. But you have to be able to see yourself doing it, that it exists, period.
Exactly. And I also think that, I know in Baltimore, there's a new organization called like Black Women Hike Baltimore, which is awesome. Those sorts of things are popping up. There are people who are trying to get, there's Outward Bound and stuff like that. So there are programs, but again, I think oftentimes when you struggle and you've experienced a lot of struggle in life, a lot of Black people I know are just going to be like, nah, you didn't have air conditioning for 5 months. You're crazy. In the dead of summer. No way, which makes complete sense. Like
you said, that's a very legitimate thing,
Yeah. It's like, but you have a bed though. It's like, I know. But yeah.
You have air conditioning, you have a bed, you have a car.
Exactly.
It doesn't take you 3 days to walk 50 miles. It can take you, 50 minutes.
Exactly.
Or an hour or whatever. Yeah. I think those thoughts.
Yeah.
I legitimately go, okay, I know that I want to do this. And I've been thinking about this for a long time. But there is something to be said for good air conditioning.
Exactly. Yeah, what I told before I left, I told one of my younger cousins, and she just looked at me and she was like, "Do you get a prize at the end?"
Yeah.
Like, the prize is getting there. She's like, "I don't like that." So you mean to tell me you're walking 2,600 plus miles just to do it? And I'm like, yeah. Concept. She did not get it. And I was like, well, yeah, understandable.
Yeah. And that is not something that just she thinks, honestly.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I'm sure that you met people along the trail as you were, coming into town or hitchhiking or whatever, where you would have people who would go, why are you doing that? Like, what is the point? Are you crazy?
Yeah. Yep.
But did that sort of like almost reinforce the point of doing it, so to speak?
Absolutely. Yeah.
See, I'm soaking this all in because I was supposed to do it last year. I didn't. And so now I'm pushing it off for a few years till we get on the other side of this COVID thing.
Yeah.
And I replenished my bank account. And everybody's stories, everybody's inspiration, everybody's affirmation is sort of the thing that keeps me connected to the trails and connected to, it's a meaningful thing. There's a purpose for hiking 2,650 miles,
Yeah, and it's so magical to put your body through that sort of torture every single day and it not just fall apart. There are moments we go into town and everyone's doing the hiker wobble and I'm just waiting for my body to give up on me, and it didn't. And there's so much magic in that for me. I got into a point where my shoes, we were probably 200 miles away from Canada, and my shoes were literally falling apart, and Space Jam was gluing and sewing them together because we just got to make it these last 200 miles. And I'd have every single day, I'd be like, all right, I'm out. And he'd be like, okay. Cause I had to warm up my feet because they'd be so hurty and swollen. But once I'm like, all I got to do is get through the first mile and then I'm good for the rest of the day. But it's just so amazing how much our bodies can handle and withstand and get stronger. I was probably, obviously, this most strongest I'd ever been in my life at the end of that.
Yeah.
And it not only physically strong, but mentally strong to be able to look back and say, holy crap, I literally walked to Canada from Mexico. That's really awesome.
I can do hard things.
Yeah, exactly. And I can do hard things that I never would have thought I would do or didn't even know I would do even a year ago.
What was the most surprising thing you learned about yourself, either physically, mentally, or both?
I'd probably say that I always thought of myself as ambitious, but I didn't think I was that ambitious. And I realized that I had a lot more mental fortitude than I allowed myself to believe I had. Even looking back at it now, I still can't believe that I actually did it. But it's like, I've done an experience and as we all have, have worked through many difficult things in life where it's like, I'm never going to make it out of this. But doing that, it gave me a different sense of I can do anything, because a lot of the other things I've been through in life, I thought were just things that were a lot of traumas and things that a lot of Black people go through, that I was just like, well, I've been taught since I was younger that I have to go through these things and I'm going to make it through and I'm strong and I'm this and I'm that. But this was something I complete self-inflicted. And I went through with it. And that was really, really, I don't have words. It's still I'm still in awe of that accomplishment. It's one of my greatest accomplishments.
As you should be. That is huge. Which I think is part of the reason why everybody wants to do it or goes for it, is to prove themselves against, to throw themselves against the mountains and the pain and all of that stuff and see if they can come through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the insanity of the whole task.
Yeah, and it's great too, because once you have your bubble of people, it's like we're just all a group of crazies out here stinking and eating. and hurting and just doing this thing. It's really great.
Was there, because I would imagine like actually, let me step back from that for a second, because you have a quote in one of the pictures that you posted on Instagram from the desert that says, that day or that moment feels like the devil's ball sack.
100%.
Which is so like, exactly.
It's spot on.
Exactly. Like I could picture that.
Yes, it is. You can feel it.
Yeah.
You can feel that. It was very, very, very hot. And in it, I was like, the desert is beautiful, but I want out. And after I finished, the desert was my favorite section.
What flipped it for you?
So at the beginning, I met my trail family in the desert. I got my trail name in the desert. When we got to Kennedy Meadows, that feeling, Kennedy Meadows South, that feeling of togetherness, like all of us were like, heck yeah, we made it to the Sierras, like that, all of that feeling, on top of it being extremely dry. So it was like, we didn't have to worry about drying out gear or anything like that. And then also the sense of community with all of the trail angels that were, making sure there were water caches and stuff like that. It also made me feel connected. So yeah, I mean, it was just my favorite part. And I got it's my baby. It was my introduction to backpacking, where I got my trail legs, where I got my hiker hunger, all of that great stuff.
The first.
So, all my firsts. Yeah. Oregon was a close second. A close second.
What about Oregon did you fall in love with?
The scenery, for sure. All of the mountains, the difference in Northern California and Oregon, where Northern California wasn't terrible terrain wise, but it was incredibly smoky because of all the wildfires. And Oregon, everyone says Oregon is flat. Oregon is not flat. It's relatively flat. It's like,
compared to the Sierras in Washington.
Right, exactly. It's like, it's easier in comparison to those places. I can see what you're getting at. But it was very enjoyable. I really enjoyed the hiking. The trail was very well maintained. We started to pass southbounders, so that was cool. And also because we were finally out of California. So I was like,
that's a huge moment.
Yeah, it's like, yay, something new. Mm-hmm.
When you hit Kennedy Meadows South and you're heading into the mountain, I don't know about what time of the year you hit there, because I don't know how much snow was there. It wasn't a heavy snow year, luckily.
No, it was not. It was not. We got to Kennedy Meadows South, I think, like June 7th ish, around about that time, because we started on May 7th. So I think we got there exactly a month later. And there wasn't a ton of snow. There was definitely some snow, but one of my favorite days was the climb up Forest. I always want to call it Forest Whitaker Pass, but it's Forster's Pass.
Forest Whitaker would be so proud.
Exactly. Somebody needs to put a picture of him on top of the pass. So dropping down into Kings Canyon, it was just like, what is this place? This is beautiful. Yeah, but there wasn't a ton of snow. We didn't have a lot of difficulty getting up and over the passes. I think maybe one time we couldn't see the trail, or I think it was Pinchot Pass or Muir Pass, one of those. But for the most part, we were very, very lucky. We didn't even get rain, but only 2 days. And
wow,
one of those days was like sprinkling. So we only actually had one day. And it was the most miserable day of my life. But
oh, do tell.
So I didn't think I was going to make it. I'm having a lot of feelings right now. So we were exactly like, I can't remember the mileages. Maybe I want to say like 27 miles away from, oh God, there was a ferry. So there was a closure, I think, in that area. So you had to take a different route to get to Stehekin, or you could take a ferry. So we were like, we're taking the ferry. But we needed to make it to this town. So we get up, we heard it had started raining a little bit the night before, but we were like, okay, we haven't really had any rain. It'll probably pass.
How bad could it be?
Yeah, whatever. 130 days without rain, whatever. We're fine. So we get up the next morning and it's kind of raining, but like very lightly. We pack up, we're walking. And then all of a sudden it's just torrential downpour. The trail, we can't see it. It's like everything is flooded. We're walking past tents where people were definitely like, I'll see you tomorrow, like not doing this today. It stopped for a little bit and then comes back down. So we drop down and there's just mud everywhere. So we're clobbering through. We want to stop because we're hungry, but we can't stop because it's cold and wet. So we just kept trucking along, and it had been raining so hard that we were, I want to say, 2 miles away from where we wanted to finish for the night. And there was a river crossing that was not supposed to be as deep as it was. And it was incredibly silty. Like you couldn't see anything. And so Space Jam looks at me and he's like, should we just camp? And I was like, no, we have to make it to this ferry.
The ferry. Don't forget the ferry.
We have to go get the ferry. So we hold on to each other. We get across. It's starting to get dark. Both of us are exhausted and just so cold. We reach a campsite that did not exist. So we had to keep walking in the rain, climbing up the side of a mountain. And then he finds and gut hooks this, there is a privy that was off the trail. So he looked at me, I looked at him, and I said, let's go see what's going on with this privy area, because if it's flat, we're done for the night. So we found there was a trail that led to the privy, and we found like a flat spot on that trail, and we were like, I'm sorry, guys, whoever needs to go to the privy is just going to have to walk around us because we cannot walk anymore. So we set up camp, and both of us are just like, I'm crying. He's trying not to. He's just like consoling me. And I'm like, what are we doing? What is this? And so then we slept in the next day and then got up, and we were like, okay, it didn't rain again for the rest of our time. So we made it, but that was a struggle day for sure. A pure struggle day.
I literally thought when you said privy, I thought that you were going to say that you camped in the privy, because that's been known to happen. That would have been the cherry on top of the day.
That would have been great. I would have gladly slept in a privy that night. Like I would have dealt with whatever came with that, because it was a tough day. It was a really tough day. But then we both, after, when we woke up the next morning, and forecast, of course, was like blue skies the rest of the time. We were like, well, I guess we kind of deserved it, because we didn't have like really any snow, and then we didn't have any rain. So like the one day really sucked, but it was one day. And him having hiked the AT, he was just like, whatever.
Yeah, I'm sure he got quite rained on with the AT.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you guys got through Washington in particular with only one day of rain is lucky.
Very, very, very lucky.
Washington smiled on you.
I think Washington knew that I was at my body was at its wit's end, and it's like, if it rains every day, I just might.
I know we're only like 50 miles away, but I might.
I might be done. Yeah. And it was really great because we finished September 28th, and some of our friends finished a couple days later, and we had just missed the first snow. And I was like, I don't know about that. Like, Canada might have had to see me later, because I don't do well with cold, wet feet things. So
yeah. Amen.
And I hiked in a skirt, which wouldn't have been the greatest experience.
But I'm assuming you had like leggings or something like that.
Yeah. Well, it was like a skirt with shorts built into them.
What is the official term for that?
A skort.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So it would have been fine, but on the rain day, I had gotten these. Kevin had used this brand of, I don't even know what the material was for rain gear, but I had bought them as well. And both of our rain gear just like shredded to pieces, because it was raining so much. Like all of our clothes, like everything was just destroyed.
You were wet.
Yeah. It was terrible. So I wouldn't have been able to use rain gear anyway. So we were very, very lucky that it didn't rain and that we didn't catch the snow.
Yeah. But I'm assuming like when you went into the Sierras that you had microspikes with you and an ice. You guys knew enough about what was coming that you were like, okay, we can. Yeah,
because 2018 was such a low snowpack year, and Space Jam was keeping an eye on it. And so we had the gear at home that we could have our parents ship to us if we needed it, but we started without it and we didn't end up needing it.
Nice. Because that's a whole new host of uncertainty, so to speak, because very few people actually have experience with those things.
Yeah, which I didn't. I had looked up so many YouTube videos on how to self-arrest, self-assist.
Yep. Self-arrest.
Yeah. And I was like, I don't know if I'm that quick. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that move. So I was hoping for low snow, and we definitely got that. What we didn't get was low mosquitoes, which was my greatest challenge for the Sierra.
They swarmed you.
I was Space Jam's bug repellent.
They all just clustered.
Yeah. At one point, he would walk behind me just to go try to get them away from me, because he said I was in tears, and he was like, "You literally have a cloud of mosquitoes following you." And at that point, I was like, I don't want to use DEET. I don't want to use DEET. It was like, by the time we got to basically the end of the Sierra, I was like, give me all the DEET. I need it, because I will not survive.
Cover me, indeed.
Yes, yes, I needed it because I had for at least, I want to say 6 months after the trail, I was still healing from all of the bites I had on my legs that I was constantly scratching. Yeah.
See, that would have been definitely a moment where I was like, oh, don't know about this, because they'll drive you mad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Every new terrain on the PCT brings a new gift.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it does.
You're having a flashback. I can see it.
I'm seeing them all.
I can imagine, because there are moments, I guess going back to the desert, but there are moments in the desert where I feel like it starts to sink in, like what you're doing and the hiker trash of it all and that kind of thing. Like when you are sheltering or siestaing under an overpass, you know, or a bridge or a drainage tunnel or something like that. And like having that out of body experience of looking around and just being like, I would never have pictured my life like this.
I got mine pretty early on. I got a quick, hearty wake-up call in the form of blisters.
Oof. That's another one.
Yeah, I was wearing the incorrect pair of shoes at the beginning for the desert and developed these huge blisters on the entire bottoms of my feet, on both feet. And I did have a pair of bedrock sandals I started to hike in because I was like, I'm not doing this. That was within the first 100 miles. And we got to Mike's place and Space Jam had to cut the blisters off and wrap my feet. And it was just, it was an experience. And I was like, oh, okay. So I'm here. We're doing this. This is a thing. This is a thing. And he'd be like, do you want to take a day off? And I was like, well, no, the damage is done. Like, I got new shoes. The damage is done. You've done surgery on my feet. Let's go. We're in here. We're doing this.
How? I mean, everybody's probably had blisters at one point or another, but they're usually like minuscule blisters, and those are painful and uncomfortable enough. Like, how were you hiking with?
I don't know. It was superhuman strength. It's like, I have no idea. Because I think also because I was hiking, maybe also because I was not hiking alone, I also felt an obligation to try harder. Because he was an experienced hiker, obviously. And it was also very early on in our actual relationship.
There's nothing like a relationship test to, you know.
So I think I also felt an obligation to not give up super easily because we were supporting each other, and he was obviously willing to figure out whatever I needed to do, whether it be take extra 0 days or, you know, change shoes, whatever I needed. He was there to support me. But I was also like, I mean, it hurts, but we either going to go forward or go back, and going back like is just as far as going forward. So I might as well go forward. And yeah.
How long did it take for those, even though you switched? And speaking of that, what were the right shoes for you specifically?
So funny story. So before the trail, I tried the Lone Peak Ultras.
I think where we left off was saying, so what shoes did you ended up working for you? And you were starting to tell that story.
Yeah. So I tried the Lone Peaks before, and they gave me blisters on a test hike. So I was just like, I'm not doing ultras. I'm not going to be able to do those. So then I got a pair of Keens, like boots. And I don't know why I thought waterproof boots were a good idea for the desert, or why they were even necessary, given that, there are trail angels putting water out because there isn't water. So,
yeah.
Don't know what I was thinking there. So then I ended up, when we got to Warner Springs, there was, I forget the name of the company, but they were selling shoes there. And so I tried on a couple pairs of shoes, and then ended up really, really loving the Temps, the Ultra Temps. And those were the shoes that I ended up wearing for the rest of the trail.
So there were ultras, but not the Lone Peaks, not what everybody always talks about, but a separate version.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So they were great. They were, I think like with most people, my feet were swelling, and also growing and getting wider. So it was nice. The Temps are really good. I actually just got a new pair recently for hiking and stuff, and they're super comfy.
I'll have to look into them because I've literally never heard of them before.
Mm-hmm. They're really good.
So I take it you were there at Warner Springs during the shakedown.
Mm-mm.
So ultras were just randomly there.
Oh, what's the shakedown? I was thinking like a gear shakedown.
Yeah, there's basically, I think, vendors set up and people, hikers come in, and a lot of times that's where you hear people doing like a big shakedown, where people go through your pack and go, "Why do you need this again?"
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there wasn't anything like that. There was just it was a mobile like gear store. They were in, I think it was like an Airstream or something, and they were the only vendor there. There weren't like other people. Yeah, but I had experienced the shakedown from that one a few times, where he was like, "Do you really think you want to bring a canteen?"
Well, as a matter of fact, I do, but I see your point.
Yeah.
Was there anything that made it into your bag at the beginning that you were at a certain point were like, because one of the cliches is you pack your fears.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So was there any of those fears that you packed, I guess, that you at a certain point let go of?
Nope. I think everything that I started with, essentials wise, I ended up having at the end. I don't think I even ever sent anything home. Yeah.
You did really good.
Yeah. I mean, I think I also I had a great person to help me, because I think if I had just done this on my own without guidance and adult supervision, I likely would have had a lot of things that I didn't need. But he was great at helping me with that. And I think I never felt like, even thinking about, because he had his mom send him out certain things that he thought he needed or that he wanted. But after a while, I was just like, well, I've been making it with what I have now, so I don't really need anything else. So I never even got my mom to like ship me anything extra. So yeah.
Did that change the way, once you got home and you realized that you could literally live out of a backpack, everything that you would need. And you get home to your apartment or your whatever, and you walk into it and you're like, how much of this do I really need?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I still to this day, with the exception of like my desk I'm sitting at and my whiteboard, I can fit everything that I own, like clothes, shoes, toiletries, into my hiking backpack.
Wow, you took it serious.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. I donated so many things. I sold a lot of stuff. Now we're a little more settled, so we do have some furniture, but I'm always like, we can sell it or we can ship it, and whatever we need to do with that stuff is replaceable. But yeah, I definitely scaled down a whole lot.
You feel lighter?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I moved to Austin in 2019 when he was starting the CDT. And I literally drove the car down to Austin with my backpack and a bag or a tote little bin of spices. That was it. That was
Brilliant.
my life. Yep, that was it.
We've kind of talked about it a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
how has hiking changed? How has successfully through hiking the PCT changed what you want for yourself, what you expect for yourself going forward?
In a lot of ways. One, I definitely have become more adventurous and more of a risk-esque taker. I'm not, I don't foresee myself, making any super rash decisions about my life, but, I definitely have had a thirst for adventure and seeing other places. As soon as we got back from the PCT, we moved to Colorado, and then we came back to Maryland, and then I moved to Austin by myself. And it's really just shown me that I don't have to be content, or I don't have to pretend to be content with what I'm not content with. And that it's okay to want change, and it's okay to be afraid of change, and that it all really just adds to your uniqueness and your essence as a person and as a human, and how we all are just constantly evolving. And I also just learned that I should take a chance and a bet on myself. Like, I, again, can do way more than I think I can do. And that oftentimes it's the inner chatter of self-doubt, and even sometimes the outer chatter of you can't or you shouldn't do certain things. That's really just noise. And that ultimately, if you want to do something, you can and you will, if you believe in yourself and just put in the effort. And that is exciting and scary because I will totally admit, sometimes it's hard to take accountability for what's happening in your life.
Yeah.
And that it puts extra responsibility on me to be like, I can change my current situation if I want to. I've proven it to myself before. All I have to do is believe in myself and do the work. And that's big.
Powerful, very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that we didn't talk about that we should?
Let's see. One thing that I've thought a lot about that I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily talk about is I've struggled with a lot over the course of since the teenage years with body image. Mm. And prior to starting the PCT, I intentionally gained weight because I expected to lose it. And I did. I lost it plus like 20 pounds or so. But then coming home, I never thought about, I'd always heard about, post-trail depression and how you miss being on the trail and you just go back to normal life and it's difficult to readjust. But I never thought about the difficulty of readjusting to eating and food and exercise, like as a normal, regular human being who's not a world-class athlete, exercising every single day. And it took me until like very, very recently, within the last few months, to be like, feel back in my body. Like I had gained all that weight back plus some because I'm working remotely, or I had been working remotely since finishing the trail. And it's just, I think a lot of people don't think about, we think about the mental change, but not the physical change. And that's a tough thing to work through to, especially for me. I have always been a very active person. I also have always been into things like fashion and being cool and like hip, but I also felt like, was I not being true to myself after the trail? Because as we just talked about, like got home and I got rid of so many things. And so I thought, okay, well, I can't feel good in my body without feeling materialistic. Or if I wanted to like buy a new dress, it was like, do I need this dress, or am I feeding back into this materialistic thing? And I had to have slowly coming to realize, like, two things can be true. Like I can be an outdoorsy, fun person and also be myself outside of that. Like that's not all of my personality and all of who I am. And it just took a long time for me to regulate my eating,
It's a huge thing.
Regulate my exercise, especially with 2020, not really being able to go to gyms and everyone just being in the house. It took me a good 2-3 years to really get back into who I am outside of the PCT and being a hiker. And that was, it's still something I'm working through now. And it's an amazing, beautiful experience I would never take back. But I think people should also be aware that it might take some time to readjust and rediscover who you are as a person outside of that experience.
Yeah. It's a little bit like you hike the trail, you think you hike the trail in hopes of finding these answers, but sometimes the trail gives you more questions, particularly once you come off of it and you have to exist outside of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go?
Yeah, a beautiful thing. And exactly what you just said.
Yeah. How did you, related to the body issues, the body image issues, because you went on the trail, you lost a lot of weight, I would assume gained a lot of muscle mass, came back then off the trail. how did you, or how have you found peace in that space again? Or have you yet? Or is that one of the things that you're still kind of working through?
Yeah, I'm still working through it. When I got off the trail, I was definitely underweight for what I'm used to. I have always been a naturally thicker girl and a little robust. And so at first, it took an adjustment to me being that thin and that strong. Just being obviously on the trail, you don't have mirrors, you don't see yourself, you're just walking along, and I might catch a mirror in a hotel or a hostel, but being back home, I'm seeing myself, and my body is way leaner than I'm used to. So at first I'm thinking, oh my God, I love this. I want to stay this way. But I was also triggered by past body issues where I'd be like, well, now I have to focus on staying this way. Like now I have to focus on staying this thin. And then it shifted where, everyone else is like, wow, you're way too skinny. You have to gain weight. Like you don't look good. This isn't what you usually look like. And then I'm thinking, oh my God, I must look sick or something. And so I'm eating like a hiker, but I'm not walking like a hiker. And so I got back to my normal weight within a few months. And then I started a remote job when we moved out to Colorado. And I think then the hiker post-trail depression hit me like a ton of bricks. And so then I'm at home every day alone, and I'm just eating and eating and eating, and I'm not wanting to go and exercise because we were living in the mountains of Colorado. So I'm like, there's my excuse. I'm not going out there. It's snowing all the time. Screw that. And then I found myself, 6 months later being 20 pounds over what I normally was. And then I just tried to be easy with myself to say, you just did this amazing thing. Your body's adjusting, your mind is adjusting, you're adjusting to normal life. And just be easy with myself. So I tried to not force myself to get back to a certain number, and just learn to be at peace with my body and say, like, I remind myself that I'm beautiful and that I'm worthy and that I'm all of these great things, and that I don't have to be a certain number on the scale for that to be true. And at the same time, I wasn't necessarily happy with where I was. So there's that struggle of being like, I'm good enough where I am, and yet I'm not happy. So how do I balance that? How do I find the balance? And so it has been maybe like 4 months, and I hiked the PCT in 2018, of where I've finally got to a place where I'm meal prepping again, and I'm exercising 4 times a week, and I'm 3 times a week, and I'm going on walks, and I'm just keeping my mind and my body in a bit of a routine, so that I generally feel better about the place that I'm in. And I have lost weight, I've gained weight, I've lost, like it goes up and down, but ultimately I'm just feeling better about my level of activity. And 2020 was hard for all of us. 2021 is not
auspicious so far.
Looking too hot, but we're doing it. We're trying, we're making it through. And it's just, to lose weight that quickly, and to be doing something so amazing, and to be just kind of in this utopia of sorts, and then you come out of it and it's just like, what do I do now? there's a lot to be said for that part as well, because I know, I don't want to completely tell his story, but I know Space Jam has found it difficult to readjust, because this last year was the first year he hadn't planned a thru hike in 3 consecutive years. And so even just that part is, it's tough. You're chasing that feeling. I think a lot of the time you're chasing that feeling of excitement and something new constantly, and all of this stimulation and greatness. And then you come back to life and it's like, it's not comparable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think is part of the reason why it's not uncommon for people who do the hikes to keep doing the hikes. They are living now for the next hike, the next trail.
Yeah.
Do you look at yourself in the mirror or think about your body, be in your body, and just celebrate like what it did for you, what it can do, what it does do?
Sometimes it really depends on the day.
Yeah.
I try to make a habit of looking in the mirror and being like, you are beautiful. You are great. Your body is strong. I prove it to myself all the time with some of the exercises and workouts I'm doing. Like it's interesting when you're aware, I know my body is strong. I know my body provides so much to me outside of being aesthetically pleasing.
Mm-hmm.
And yet
I know. If it were only that easy.
Yeah.
It is. I think it's a huge topic I think for everybody, not everybody maybe, but for a lot of people who come off the trail, men and women, because you do have that weight fluctuation and eating like a hiker when you're not on the trail and that kind of stuff. But it's particularly difficult, particularly challenging for women, because you could start the trail with issues relating to body image and that kind of stuff, that you challenge or that you struggle with and you have to, work through as your body does crazy things on the trail. But you could also not start with that, come off of the trail, have your body doing these crazy things and develop it as well. And then obviously the outside influences don't help.
Yeah, they don't. And then after finishing the trail, I went to a doctor's appointment, and I was, as I said, I was practically underweight, and I was told that I was pre-diabetic, which, according to the doctor at the time, she told me, that can change. It changes every 3 months. So because of all the trash I was eating on the trail, I was perfectly healthy looking, but I was pre-diabetic. I'm fine now because I've regulated my eating, but it's like, I didn't even think about that part.
True.
Like yes, I'm losing weight and I'm feeling strong and I feel healthy, but the level of freeze-dried food and
candy,
mac and cheeses, it's all, it can contribute also to that. And it's particularly difficult for me because I have had body issues in the past and unhealthy ways of approaching eating and food and exercise and diet and all that stuff. I didn't realize how triggering the trail was for bringing that stuff back up, because I had worked really hard in the years leading up to that, in my early mid-20s, to like get out of that place. And then I go on the trail and it's like, oh my God, I can have all the things all the time that I have been eating in very, very low quantities. And now I'm just a queen just enjoying all of this stuff. And then I come home and I'm still enjoying all of that stuff, not being able to, you can't turn the switch off. Once it's turned on, it's difficult to turn it back off.
Yeah. And they do say, again, another trail cliche, that the trail, you can't run away from your issues or the things that you need to work on further, so to speak, because the trail will keep providing.
Yep. Absolutely. The trail definitely provides.
Irony insert.
So many things it provides. Absolutely.
Yeah. Where can people find you if they want to follow your continued adventures or have questions for you or all the things?
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to follow me on the Instagram. My name is Nhandi. That's NHANDI, and _ is my username. I'm trying my best. One of my goals of 2021 is to be more active on there, because I've developed this theory where it's like either use it or lose it. So
nice.
I'm either going to use social media or I'm going to be done with it. So follow me on there. I am happy to answer any questions. I love talking to people. If you're interested in through hiking the PCT or just want to bounce ideas off of me, I'm happy to speak with anyone.
Beautiful. What is when you think of the trail, I'm sure that there are many visions that flood your brain, but what's one of those visions when you think of the trail, like that enduring memory for you?
I'm going to say Belden.
Okay.
Because Space Jam and I and our hiker family, our trail family, went back to Belden for the sunset camp out. There's like this big party that happens in the town of Belden, which is like a street. But we all were just so happy. We had so much fun. We had just crossed the halfway point, and one of our good friends came out to visit, and we just cut loose. We just danced and ate and partied and just had the best time. And that's reminds me of, one, that I had found a community, and that it was just a moment, a few days for us to be like, wow, we've made it halfway. Halfway was a very long way.
And we're still in California.
And we now have a group, and we're doing this, and we're proud of each other, and we're celebrating one another. And it was just such a great experience to do that with them. Great people. And not to mention, it's really where my relationship with Space Jam blossomed, was on the PCT. We were tested in a lot of ways. What we learned basically was that we're amazing partners.
Nice.
we work really well together. So the entire trail was, I think, very integral in us probably even still being together.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. I mean, the trail can either tear you apart or make you tighter, so to speak.
Yep.
Did that surprise you?
Yes. In all honesty, yes. It did, because we had been officially together for like 6 months before we hiked the PCT, and there were no red flags of like we couldn't be that great, but we also weren't together every single day for 145 days in a row. So it was really amazing to see how the both of us just switched on to pick up the other person when, if he was having a bad day or something was going on with him, I was able to step in and lift him up, and he was able to do the same for me. And not to mention just having someone that, like, while you're going to grab water, can set up the tent. That's freaking awesome.
Priceless.
Yeah. And then we also really, one thing that we also did really well was we maintained autonomy throughout the trail. Like, I had my own stove, he had his own stove. We had, the only thing that we shared was our tent. So we were able to, we also hiked separately and hiked at different paces. And I really enjoyed our level of individuality and togetherness that we kind of worked out. And it wasn't very easy. It took a lot of conversations and a lot of hard conversations. And but at the core of it all, we both just really wanted to experience this together, and so we made it work, and ultimately it became like the best of friends.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Did you ever cowboy camp?
Yeah. Only we did a few times in the desert, and then we didn't again until Oregon. Okay. I definitely wasn't cowboy camping in the Sierra because of the mosquito problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, most of our cowboy camping happened in the desert, and then maybe like once or twice in Oregon.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how I think about cowboy camping, but you either love it or you hate it, it seems like.
Yeah, I liked it the few times that we did because it was easier to pack up in the morning.
Yeah.
But I like the comfort of our little tent home, because I don't want anything crawling in my mouth. I'm a
exactly.
Yeah. I sleep with my mouth open because I like to sleep on my back. So it's like, I don't want to wake up to like a scorpion or spider in my mouth. I don't want that. So I would pull my sleeping bag above my head. Mm-hmm.
Makes perfect sense to me. There was one thing that I wanted to ask you, and as much as I would love to have it on the podcast, it's a question for me because you mentioned it a little bit, but honestly, I don't have to think about it, therefore I don't contemplate it, which is hair. I mean, honestly, like, my hair is as short as it is because it annoys the crap out of me, and so I cut it short.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you have a whole different set of issues and thoughts that have to go into that, regardless of, I have a feeling, the length of it.
Yep. Yeah. Um, I had to have specific types of shampoo, conditioner. Like I couldn't use what was in a hotel or a hostel. So my mom was sending me like bottles of shampoo and conditioners and like oils and things. And it's a process. Even just I just rebraided my hair yesterday, and it's like, it took me like 3 hours from start to finish, from combing out, detangling, washing, conditioning, detangling again, braid. It's like, it's a lot. You have to have a dedicated day to do your hair. And so, doing that on the trail, yeah, because I just had extra weight for, just the essentials that I needed. And then I would always keep my hair in cornrows, because having my hair out in the elements is just not, without being able to keep it up regularly, or to keep up with it regularly, was just like a no-go. And I even taught Space Jam how to braid, because there were sometimes I was like, I can't, my arms hurt. So I'd be like calling in my troop, and just like, come fix this one. You didn't get very good at it, but it was like, he tried.
He still did it.
He tried.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot. Because again, it takes time, and you have to manage it. And there are times when my hair was super dry, where I have to just like get into a stream or something and wet it just to get the moisture, because black hair is dry. So like, the longer we go without moisturizing it, the drier it gets, and then it can break off. So yeah, so it's like, you have to constantly be keeping it moisturized and oiled and conditioned. So yeah, it was a lot to manage.
It's interesting because, interesting is the wrong word, but I take for granted. Do you have a light over there? You're getting pretty dark.
Yep. I was just thinking I would,
like, talking about the weight in your pack and so forth. Like, I honestly take for granted, I realize, the fact that, I can walk into a hotel, and as crappy as that shampoo and conditioner is, it's doable. And I don't need to think about carrying it. I don't need to think about finding it, because I'm sure a lot of the small towns that the trail goes through aren't going to have any sort of supplies that you could possibly use.
Yep. Yeah. Because it's just, again, especially for my hair type, it's all about keeping the moisture in. So a lot of the hair products that are tailored to specifically like white hair or non-black hair, really, is meant to strip your hair of the oils. And so I can't use that, because I'm trying to get my hair as conditioned as possible. So yeah, I just, at home, I bought the supplies ahead of time, and just asked my mom to fill and got these little containers, and just anytime I asked her to send a box out, she would just include that stuff in there.
And then you would just carry it basically with you. And
Yep.
Another thing that I don't think about, but is a thing.
Yeah.
And it also, I would expect, like the example you were giving on the episode, the fact that you have to do that, the fact that it takes so long is something that can separate you from the community or from everybody else because you've got to do this. And nobody else understands it or appreciates what that is.
Yep. It was just like, even in one town, I had gone through the whole process and I was like, well, I'm just going to let it air dry and I'll braid it later. And I come downstairs and one of my hiker friends was like, whoa, when did that happen? And I'm like, it's my hair. It's always been here, but it's always been pulled back. And I undid it. And he's like, oh. Yeah, it's been here. I didn't, there's nothing different. I just washed it and combed it out. It's like, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A huge thank you to Nhandi for sharing her stories from the trail, and Maya Wynn for the use of the song Try Again. On next week's episode, I'll be talking with Chaba Winters about his unexpected adventures on the PCT in 2019. I hope that these conversations inspire you to get out there and have a few hiker trash moments of your own. I'll see you on the trail.